So this is a Reform UK advert. Why don't you explain what happens in it, Benedict?
So in this advert, it's a single static graphic which says Britain is broken, Britain needs reform. There's no audio, and it's just a single static that plays out for 4 minutes and 40 seconds.
And in the explanation for this, Reform say they had to argue with the broadcasters that they could put it out so that their emergency tapes didn't kick in. I think they had to turn that off. So they make a virtue of the fact it's not smiling, grinning leaders. It's not meeting, kissing babies and glad-handing nurses. It's just 4.5 minutes of just a graphic saying Britain is broken, Britain needs reform. Mark, do you think it works?
I think it's a work of genius, isn't it? It's the best 15 quid that anyone's ever spent in this election campaign. I mean, I absolutely love it. It's sort of audacious. It's, different. It's surprising. It meets all my tests pretty much. It's surprising. It tells their truth. It gets talked about by people. I've had it shared hundreds of times just to me alone. And it got loads and loads and loads of free media. It must have had 2 or 3 million quid's worth of free media. But what makes me wonder, I'd love to know the answer to this. So if Reform are listening, please tell me. You can choose to have these ads 2 minutes 40, 3 minutes 40, 4 minutes 40. What was the calculation that the long version of this would work better than the shorter one? I'd love to know.
So just explain that, Mark. So when you get the slot at the end of the news, whatever it is, you're watching, I don't know, BBC One or ITV or Channel 4, the party gets to choose how long it is.
They do. They get one of 3 choices: 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 4 minutes. And there's a basic calibration. If you've got any comprehension of the British public or any understanding of TV or campaigning, you usually go for the short one, right? Say what you've got to say and get out of there. And if you're sort of fairly ignorant of that and you're a politician and you believe that people are interested in what you have to say, then you go for the 440. And that has been happening increasingly recently, I have to say. So you can make your own conclusion from that. But on this one, they could have gone any one of those 3 lengths and they've gone long. So they've obviously got a belief in the power of this ad to not move for that long. And, to be fair, I salute them for it. I admire them for it. And it's a gutsy move and it works.
Yeah, I love the fact that they went for the maximum length. I mean, this election broadcast is the TV equivalent of a finger in the eye of the Westminster establishment. And so the fact that they've gone for the full length of the, a 6-word ad, I just think is absolutely genius. And the fact that, not many people know that there are these options available, but for the few of us like Mark and myself who are all too aware, it just adds an extra layer of brilliance to this broadcast.
I mean, to me, I call it a cliffhanger. I was waiting. I stayed around just in case something happened, so they kept me for the whole duration as well. I'm absolutely taken aback. I can't really name one thing that I would like about them, but now suddenly I admire them. It's a shock to me, I have to say.
So I suppose, Mark, because whether it's on TV and you can flick to an infinite number of TV channels, if they don't now it's a party political broadcast, it's so easy to flick over. Or if you're scrolling through social media and they all look the same, they're out smiling, they've got balloons and signs and all that. Having something which just hooks you in, and like you said, you sit there thinking, well, something's going to happen in a minute. Something's going to happen in a minute. Or something's going to happen in a minute. And it doesn't. Actually, it just means that you've inadvertently allowed yourself to just stare at an advert that you wouldn't have done otherwise.
Yeah, and actually, the basis of pretty much all advertising is repetition, right? Getting a single message across clearly. And in this kind of campaign, there's been so much noise, so many messages, so little substance. It's kind of refreshing just for someone. It's effectively repeating or refreshing the same message every, second or every 25th of a second. And it's surprisingly powerful. And I think surprisingly persuasive by saying less, right? I mean, it doesn't persuade me. It never would. But then again, nor would, the balloons and the babies. So, and most people who watch these are not persuaded, by the way, at all. So, the floating audience are not tuning into these things. So the fact that this would have been passed around mates, talked about in the pub, women in the supermarket will have said, did you see? that's an incredibly powerful effect alongside the ad itself. It's the effect that the ad has had in creating a conversation, and no other ad has come close to that a party has put out in this campaign so far.
Although I would say one of the unusual things about this election is that there has been now 2 excellent party election broadcasts. So the Ed Davey one for the Liberal Democrats, where
true.
I mean, both of those have gone massively viral.
That's the personal one where he was talking about looking after his disabled son and losing his mum and dad, and it was, again, I suppose it was just tonally, it was the exact opposite of what looks like a party political broadcast.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, whether it's a direct correlation, but the Lib Dems polling, I think, jumped 4 percentage points in the week after that party election broadcast came out. And you had, Ed Davey's been doing all these silly things, falling off paddleboards and going down water slides, and that was all about just helping people to remember that he exists and who his name is and what he looks like. But then this party election broadcast comes along and just, gives him meaning and a depth of character, and I think it's just had a catalytic effect on who this guy is. So I think everyone had been seeing pictures of him in the papers, thinking, "Oh yeah, I do recognise that bloke." Suddenly they hear that he's got this incredible story, and the polls jump accordingly.
And I suppose they're sort of working alongside each other, sort of, he's not just a Wally, this is his backstory, it sort of ties together. The other person we wanted to pull out, I think it was you, Benedict, was who is performing well or isn't during this campaign. I think you wanted to pick out Wes Streeting, so here's a bit of Wes.
Look at the difference in our records between a Labour government that delivered the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction in history, and a Conservative government that has delivered the longest waiting lists on record and the worst crisis in the history of the NHS.
Now, but is it just because actually he is a strong performer in any medium, whether it's, taking on someone on Question Time, going toe to toe with interviewers, that if you're a good communicator, you'll work in an advert?
I think that's right. It undoubtedly comes down to he's incredibly authoritative and charismatic in the way that he delivers political communication. So that's a big part of it. I also think that the policy area is a big part of it. So he's talking about the NHS and waiting lists. And the ad includes a data point showing a graph of how the waiting list, what came down under the Labour government up until 2010 and then went up under the Conservatives. So it's a salient policy area with an incontrovertible data point, which is sat there at the same time as Wes is talking about the issue. So I think it's a combination of the policy area, a really good data point, and then brilliant delivery.
And we should mention as well the piggy bank. The Tory piggy bank, the Tories posted, they've used a few of these now, a sort of big red piggy bank, and they say with the slogan, "If you think Labour will win, start saving." And it's been flying, it's come up out of the ground, it's on posters. Is that working as a thing, Mark, or is that actually just making you think about Labour? I suppose that's how much do you use of your opponent in your advertising?
Yeah, and also just simply the power of the image.